You click to uncover Tiberius, Rome's hidden monster, and in the next few minutes, we're exposing the shocking truth about the emperor who fled Rome for an island of depravity. Get ready for a side of Roman history you won't find in textbooks. After the glorious reign of Augustus, a new emperor took the throne, Tiberius, a brilliant general, yet a deeply reluctant ruler. But what began as a seemingly stable transition quickly descended into paranoia and terror. Our source: Suetonius's Lives of the 12 Caesars, an ancient tell-all that doesn't hold back. This isn't just about a tyrannical ruler. It's about an emperor who abandoned Rome for the secluded island of Capri, where whispers of unspeakable acts and psychological torture spread like wildfire. What truly happened on that island? How did a respected military leader become history's most reclusive and reviled monster? We'll reveal the shocking personal life and twisted mind of Tiberius, a man whose dark secrets defined an entire era. Suetonius gives us a window into a psychological unraveling unmatched in ancient history. If you're ready to delve into the dark heart of the Roman Empire and witness one of history's most compelling transformations, you're in for an unforgettable story. Before we expose the monster within, please hit that like button, share your thoughts on Tiberius in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. Tiberius Nero Caesar. The patrician family of the Claudii, distinct from a plebeian branch of the same name, which was equally powerful and dignified, originally came from Regilli, a town of the Sabines. They moved to Rome soon after the city was founded, bringing with them many followers. This migration took place under Titus Tatius, who ruled jointly with Romulus, or perhaps, as some more reliable sources suggest, under Attica Claudius, the family leader, who was admitted to the patrician order by the Senate 6 years after the expulsion of the Tarquins. The state granted them lands beyond the Anio River for their followers and a burial place near the capital. Over time, the Claudii achieved great honor: 28 consulships, 5 dictatorships, 7 censorships, 7 triumphs, and 2 ovations. Their descendants bore various praenomina and cognomina, but by common consent rejected the praenomen Lucius, since 2 men from branches of the family, both named Lucius, were infamous, one for robbery and the other for murder. Among their surnames was Nero, a Sabine word meaning strong and valiant. The Claudii family left a mixed legacy of notable service and scandal. For example, Appius Secus advised the Senate against an alliance with Pyrrhus, warning it would harm the Republic. Claudius Candax was the first to lead a fleet across the Sicilian Straits and expelled the Carthaginians from the island. Claudius Nero defeated Hasdrubal's large army in Italy before he could join his brother Hannibal. On the darker side, Claudius Appius Regilanus, one of the Decemvirs, tried violently to enslave a free virgin he desired, sparking a second people's secession from the Senate. Claudius Drusus controversially erected a statue of himself wearing a crown and sought to dominate Italy through his followers. Claudius Pulcher, after ominous signs from sacred birds, threw them overboard in contempt and was decisively defeated in battle. When ordered to appoint a dictator after his loss, he mockingly named his own servant. The women of the Claudii were similarly divided. One famously freed a ship sacred to the Idaean mother of the gods stuck in the Tiber by loudly praying, "Follow me if I am chaste." Yet another faced public trial for treason after she cursed her brother Pulcher from the streets, wishing he would lose another fleet for the good of Rome. Most Claudii, except for 2 who aligned with the plebeians, staunchly defended the patrician cause. They opposed plebeian authority so fiercely that even in life-or-death trials before the people, they refused to mourn or plead with them. Some even resorted to physical violence against the tribunes of the people. One Vestal virgin from the Claudian family famously rode into the capital with her brother during his triumph to prevent tribunes from interfering. From this family descended Tiberius Caesar, on both his father's and mother's sides. On his father's side from Tiberius Nero, and on his mother's from Appius Pulcher, both sons of Appius Secus. He was also linked to the Livii family through his mother's grandfather's adoption. Although plebeian, the Livii were notable for 8 consulships, 2 censorships, 3 triumphs, 1 dictatorship, and the office of Master of Horse. Esteemed members included Salinator, who criticized the tribes for their fickleness, and Drusus, who earned a new surname by killing an enemy chief in single combat. Drusus was also credited with recovering gold once given to the Senans, which some said had never truly been taken by Camillus. A great-great-grandson was called the patron of the Senate for his services against the Gracchi, but was treacherously murdered in a similar sedition. Tiberius Caesar's father was quaestor to Caius Caesar and commander of his fleet during the war in Alexandria, greatly aiding its success. He became one of the chief priests and was tasked with settling colonies in Gaul, including Narbonne and Arles. After Caesar's assassination, while most senators wished to let the matter fade, he proposed rewarding the assassins. He later served as praetor and, during a civil disturbance, kept his insignia longer than legally permitted. Following Lucius Antonius to Perugia in rebellion, he escaped to Praeneste, then Naples, and finally Sicily, unsuccessfully seeking to free slaves to revolt. Angered at barriers to Sextus Pompey and barred from using the fasces, he shifted allegiance to Mark Antony. Following a reconciliation among the rival factions, he returned to Rome. At Augustus's request, he gave up his wife Livia Drusilla, who was pregnant and had borne him a son. He died soon after, leaving 2 sons, Tiberius and Drusus Nero. Some suggest Tiberius was born at Fundi, based on his maternal grandmother's origin and an image of good fortune erected there. However, most reliable sources record his birth in Rome's Palatine district on November 16, during Marcus Aemilius Lepidus's second consulship after the Battle of Philippi. Some propose alternative dates, but this remains most accepted. Tiberius's childhood was marked by constant danger. He fled with his parents repeatedly, nearly betraying them twice by crying while they escaped enemy forces in Naples. Carried through Sicily and Achaia, he was once nearly burned alive when a sudden forest fire surrounded their party at night. Gifts from Pompeia, Sextus Pompey's sister, including a cloak and gold bully, survive to this day at Baiae. After returning to Rome, he was adopted by a senator, Marcus Gallius, but soon rejected the name due to Gallius's opposition to Augustus. At 9, he delivered a funeral oration for his father on the rostra. As he neared adulthood, he rode one of the chariot horses during Augustus's triumph at Actium and presided over celebratory games. He also commanded a troop of boys in the Trojan and Circensian games. Upon reaching manhood, Tiberius devoted himself to public life. He held gladiatorial games in honor of his father and grandfather, rewarding some veterans to fight again. These events reflected his family's wealth and influence, financed by his mother and father-in-law. He married Agrippina, daughter of Marcus Agrippa, and granddaughter of Caecilius Atticus, a friend of Cicero. They had a son, Drusus, but Tiberius later separated from her to marry Julia, Augustus's daughter. This change came reluctantly, as Tiberius remained fond of Agrippina and disapproved of Julia's immoral behavior and advances made while married to another. Though deeply saddened by the divorce, Tiberius concealed his feelings, and contact between them was eventually avoided. His marriage to Julia initially was stable but ended violently after their infant son died. He also mourned the death of his brother Drusus in Germany, personally carrying his body to Rome on foot. In his early career, Tiberius defended clients before Augustus, spoke for cities devastated by earthquakes, and prosecuted conspirators. He managed the city's scarce grain supply and supervised houses of correction accused of imprisoning travelers and draft evaders. Tiberius's first military service was as a tribune in the Cantabrian War. He later restored Tigranes to the Armenian throne, placing a crown on his head. He recovered standards lost to the Parthians and governed Gallia Comata, then troubled by barbarian raids and internal strife. He conducted campaigns against the Rhaetians, Vindolicians, Pannonians, and Germans, winning an ovation in Rome and often cited as the first to receive this honor riding in a chariot. His political rise was steady, holding offices of quaestor, praetor, consul, and a second consulship, alongside 5 years of tribunician power. Despite his successes and good health, Tiberius suddenly withdrew from Rome. Reasons vary: disgust at his wife, avoidance of public indifference, or a strategic retreat to bolster his standing from afar. Some suggest he gave up his place willingly, as Agrippa had before him, to allow Augustus's son's room to ascend. Tiberius claimed he was tired of honors and sought respite from public duties. Neither his mother's entreaties nor his father-in-law's complaints could change his mind. Refusing food for 4 days, he left quietly, going to Ostia, then traveling along Campania's coast. At Rhodes, after hearing Augustus was ill, Tiberius paused, but rumors of political intentions followed him. He settled into a modest house and villa, living simply. One day, intending to visit the sick, he unintentionally caused the town to gather them publicly. A moment that embarrassed him, but he handled with grace, apologizing to all. His only notable act of tribunician authority there was to punish an accuser who insulted him during a dispute among scholars. He soon learned his wife Julia was condemned for adultery and divorced under Augustus's authority. Though secretly relieved, Tiberius defended her modestly in letters and let her keep his gifts. When his tribunician power ended, he declared his retirement was to avoid rivalry with Augustus's sons, who had come of age. Requesting to visit friends, he was denied and advised to abandon worldly concerns. He remained in Rhodes under a cloud of suspicion, granted only a nominal title through his mother's influence. Avoiding visitors and provincial governors, he faced further distrust when his stepson Caius, influenced by a companion, viewed him with suspicion. Tiberius was even suspected of inciting revolt, prompting him to request constant supervision. He abandoned his traditional Roman habits, exchanging his riding and arms exercises for simpler clothing. For nearly 2 years, his reputation declined. His statues were torn down in Nimes, and foes threatened him openly. Eventually, with his mother's insistence and a change in political winds, he was allowed to return to Rome on the condition he abstain from state affairs. After almost 8 years away, Tiberius returned with high hopes shaped by prophecies and prodigies. While his mother was pregnant, one such sign involved her warming a hen's egg until it hatched a fine cock, symbolizing greatness. As a child, astrologer Scribonius foretold he would become a king, but without the usual royal insignia, since Caesar's rule was still unknown. During his eastern campaigns, altars at Philippi erupted in flames, omens that supported his destiny. Near Padua, he received a fortunate lot during an oracle consultation, tokens still visible today. An eagle, unknown to Rhodes, appeared on his rooftop days before his return. Just before news of his pardon arrived, his tunic seemed to catch fire, a sign confirmed by Thrasyllus, the family astrologer, whose accurate predictions saved him from Tiberius's wrath. Upon his return to Rome, after bringing his son Drusus into the Forum, Tiberius moved from Pompey's house in the Carini to the gardens of Maecenas on the Esquiline Hill. There, he set himself entirely to ease, performing only ordinary social duties and taking no part in government affairs. But when both Caius and Lucius died within 3 years, Tiberius was adopted by Augustus, along with their brother Agrippa. As part of this, he was first obliged to adopt Germanicus, his brother's son. After this adoption, he never acted as head of a household again and gave up all personal rights. He made no gifts, freed no slaves, and accepted no inheritance without considering it part of his father's property. From then on, everything was aimed at advancing his status, especially after Agrippa was dismissed and exiled, leaving Tiberius clearly as the sole hope for succession. Tiberius was granted tribunician authority for another 5 years and assigned to manage German affairs. Following an audience with Augustus, Parthian ambassadors were directed to address him in his province. But when he learned of an uprising in Illyricum, he took charge of that war, which became the most serious foreign conflict since the Carthaginians. For 3 years, he led 15 legions and an equal number of auxiliaries through great hardship and severe grain shortages. Though recalled multiple times, he persisted, fearing that so strong a foe so near would attack his retreating army. His determination paid off. He finally brought all of Illyricum under control, spanning from Italy to Noricum, Thrace, Macedonia, the Danube, and the Adriatic. His glory grew because these successes happened as Quintilius Varus was famously defeated with 3 legions in Germany. Many believed the victorious Germans would have joined the Pannonians if not for Tiberius's earlier campaign ending the Illyrian War. He was awarded a triumph and other great honors. Some wished to name him Pannonicus, Invincible, or O Pius, but Augustus insisted he should be content with whatever title he received after Augustus's death. He delayed the triumph out of respect for the disaster of Varus's army. Still, he entered Rome wearing a triumphal robe and laurel crown, sitting beside Augustus and the 2 consuls as the Senate stood in attendance. After saluting the people, he was accompanied in procession to several temples. The following year, he returned to Germany. There, seeing Varus's defeat had resulted from reckless command, Tiberius chose to follow the advice of a war council rather than act alone as he usually did. He took many precautions. Before crossing the Rhine, he limited the convoy scope and personally inspected wagons at the riverbank, allowing only permitted supplies through. Beyond the Rhine, he lived simply, sitting on the bare ground for meals and often spending nights without a tent. He issued daily and emergency orders in writing, insisting his officers seek clarifications from him at any hour if needed. Tiberius enforced strict discipline, reviving old punishments and humiliations, even marking a legion commander with disgrace for sending soldiers hunting with one of his freedmen across the river. Though careful to control fate, he trusted an omen. When a lamp went out during his night watches, he took it as a sign encouraging boldness in battle. Once, close to victory, he narrowly avoided assassination by a Bructirian who was caught and tortured for plotting against him. After 2 years, he returned to Rome and finally celebrated the delayed triumph with his lieutenants, whom he honored with triumphal ornaments. Before ascending the Capitol, he dismounted his chariot and knelt before his father to oversee the ceremony. He sent Bato, the Pannonian chief, to Ravenna with rich gifts as thanks for sparing him and his troops. Tiberius then hosted a grand public feast with 1,000 tables, giving 30 sesterces to each man, and dedicated the temples of Concord, Castor, and Pollux, built from war spoils, in his and his brothers' names. Soon after, a law appointed Tiberius a colleague with Augustus in managing the provinces and conducting the census. He set out for Illyricum but was recalled upon learning Augustus's condition was grave. He found Augustus alive but beyond hope and spent a day privately with him. It was widely believed that after Tiberius left the private meeting, Augustus bitterly lamented the future of Rome under such slow decay. Some say Augustus disliked Tiberius's harsh temper and had only adopted him due to his wife Livia's insistence or to secure his own legacy. But given Augustus's prudence, it seems he carefully weighed Tiberius's virtues over his faults, declaring publicly that the adoption served the public good. In his letters, Augustus praised Tiberius as a consummate general and protector of Rome, often expressing personal affection and concern for his health. Tiberius did not announce Augustus's death until after young Agrippa was killed. Agrippa was slain by a tribune who claimed to act on a written order, though it remained unclear whether Augustus left this order or if Livia issued it in his name, with or without Tiberius's knowledge. When told the deed was done, Tiberius disavowed the command, apparently avoiding blame temporarily, and the matter was soon hushed. Summoning the Senate under his tribunician power, Tiberius began a solemn speech but, overwhelmed with grief, passed it to his son Drusus. Augustus's will was read by a freedman, with only senator witnesses admitted inside. Others verified their signatures outside. The will opened by noting the loss of Augustus's 2 sons and naming Tiberius as heir to 2/3 of the estate. This seemed to confirm suspicions that Tiberius was chosen successor more out of necessity than preference. Though he immediately assumed imperial authority, ordering guards to escort him as a sign of supreme power, Tiberius feigned reluctance. He rebuked friends urging him to accept, claiming they misunderstood the burdens of rule. He stalled the Senate with vague answers, causing impatience among senators, one of whom demanded he accept or reject the role outright. Finally, forced to accept, he complained bitterly of the heavy responsibilities but hinted he might one day resign, saying, "Until the time shall come when ye may think it reasonable to give some rest to my old age." His hesitation stemmed from fear of threats on all sides. Clemens, Agrippa's slave, had gathered forces to avenge his master's death. Lucius Scribonius Libo, a prominent senator, was secretly plotting rebellion. The armies in Illyricum and Germany were restless, demanding pay equal to the Praetorian guards. The German troops refused to accept any ruler not their choice, pressing Germanicus to take power, though he refused. To calm tensions, Tiberius asked the Senate for only partial administrative authority, claiming no man could govern alone. He feigned poor health to encourage Germanicus to wait patiently, hoping for succession or joint rule. Once the mutinies were quelled, Tiberius captured Clemens by trickery. To avoid harsh beginnings, he delayed prosecuting Libo until his 2nd year, taking security measures in the meantime, such as substituting a lead knife in a sacrifice and insisting his son Drusus remain present during sensitive talks with Libo. Once his fears eased, Tiberius acted modestly, rarely accepting the many honors offered. On his birthday, coinciding with the plebeian Circensian games, he grudgingly allowed only one 2-horse chariot in his honor. He forbade temples, flamens, or priests dedicated to him, as well as any statues or effigies without his permission, and only then outside the temple precincts. He prevented the Senate from swearing to preserve his acts or renaming September and October in his honor. He refused imperial titles such as emperor or father of the country and never used the name Augustus except in letters to kings. His 3 consulships were brief and spaced, none lasting a full term. Tiberius abhorred flattery. He never let senators approach his litter in the street, even to show respect or discuss business. When a consul tried to beg his pardon by falling at his feet, Tiberius recoiled so suddenly the man stumbled and fell. He often interrupted or corrected compliments, insisting proper language be used. When called Lord, he demanded the title stop. When others used words like sacred or authority in reference to him, he made them change to milder terms like persuasion or laborious. He endured gossip, slander, and insults without anger, declaring that in a free state, both speech and thought must be free. When the Senate wished to punish offenders, he warned that opening such cases would waste time and flood the Senate with private quarrels. He added, "If anyone speaks ill of me, I will behave so that I can justify myself, but if they persist, I shall hate them in turn." Despite all this frankness, Tiberius showed great respect to individuals and the Senate. When he disagreed with Quintus Tiberius, he politely asked pardon, explaining he meant to speak freely as a senator. Addressing the Senate, he stated, "Conscript fathers, I have often said and continue to say, a good and useful prince, vested with great power, should be a slave to the Senate, the people, and often to individuals. I have always found you kind and indulgent masters." Tiberius also introduced a certain appearance of liberty by preserving the Senate and magistrates' traditional dignity and power. Every matter, big or small, public or private, was brought before the Senate. Taxes and monopolies, the building or repair of public works, the raising and disbanding of soldiers, the deployment of legions and auxiliaries in the provinces, the appointment of generals for special wars, and responses to foreign princes' letters, all were submitted to the Senate's judgment. When a commander of a cavalry troop was accused of violent robbery, Tiberius made him plead his case before the Senate himself. He always entered the Senate house alone. Once, when ill and carried in a litter, he dismissed his attendants at the door. When Senate decrees opposed his views, Tiberius never complained. Though he believed magistrates should stay in Rome to accept their honors in person, he allowed an exception when a praetor-elect left under the honorary title of legate at large. He once proposed letting the tribunes divert funds originally left for building a new theater to road construction, but the Senate upheld the original will. When he voted with the minority on that issue, no one followed. Public affairs continued through magistrates in traditional form. Consuls retained such authority that some African ambassadors, unable to transact business with Caesar directly, complained to the consuls. Tiberius showed deference by standing as consuls arrived, giving way to them. He scolded commanders of high rank for failing to report military actions to the Senate and for seeking his advice on awarding military honors, insisting commanders alone had that right. Tiberius praised a praetor who reinstated an old custom, honoring ancestors with a public speech. He attended the funerals of notable men and treated even minor matters with moderation. When magistrates from Rhodes sent him an unsigned letter, he summoned them without anger to sign it before dismissing them. Once, the grammarian Diogenes refused to admit Tiberius to his public lectures, postponing his attendance by a week. Later, when Diogenes came to Rome seeking to pay respects, Tiberius playfully told him to return in 7 years. To governors urging heavy taxation, he replied, "A good shepherd shears his sheep, he does not flay them." Tiberius assumed supreme power gradually and managed it with varying conduct, though usually mindful of the public good. Initially, he intervened only to prevent mismanagement. He annulled some Senate decrees and frequently served as an assessor during judicial proceedings. If it seemed a defendant might escape conviction through influence, Tiberius would suddenly appear to remind judges of the law, their oaths, and the seriousness of charges. He also took responsibility for correcting public morals when neglect or bad habits threatened decay. He reduced costs of plays and spectacles by cutting actors' pay and limiting gladiators. He complained to the Senate about the soaring price of Corinthian vessels and proposed a new sumptuary law to curb extravagance. He urged yearly price controls on butchers and food sellers and had aediles regulate eating houses, prohibiting even pastry sales. Leading by example, at his own feasts he often served food left from the previous day and half a boar, saying, "It has all the same good bits as the whole." He issued an edict forbidding people to kiss upon meeting and stopped allowing New Year's gifts after January 1st, previously returning such gifts fourfold but ceasing due to constant interruptions throughout the month. Tiberius permitted nearest relatives to punish married women guilty of adultery privately, following ancient custom. He freed a Roman knight from an oath never to dismiss his wife after she was caught with her son-in-law and allowed the divorce. Prostitutes flouting the law, yes, even those of high rank, were banished to prevent evasion of penalties. He stripped a senator of honor stripes for leaving the city before July to reduce rent, and dismissed a quaestor for rejecting a wife he married just days before. He outlawed all foreign religions, including Egyptian and Jewish rites, forcing practitioners to burn their vestments and sacred items. Jewish youths were dispersed to unhealthy provinces under the pretense of military service, and others expelled from Rome on penalty of lifelong slavery if they remained. Astrologers were expelled but pardoned after promising to renounce their practice. Above all, Tiberius was determined to maintain public peace. He increased military posts throughout Italy and established a camp for the Praetorian Guard in Rome, which had previously been scattered through the city. He crushed riots swiftly, refusing to tolerate disorder. When quarrels in a theater killed several, he exiled ringleaders and performers involved despite public pleas for mercy. The people of Pollentia refused to release a centurion's body until his heirs paid for gladiator games. Tiberius sent cohorts that, secretly approaching from multiple gates with arms displayed and trumpets blaring, arrested most townsfolk and magistrates, imprisoning them for life. He ended the privileges of sanctuary everywhere. After Romans were insulted by the Cyzicenans, Tiberius revoked their freedoms earned in the Mithridatic War. Foreign troubles were handled by his lieutenants, not personally, and he reluctantly used them only when necessary. Hostile princes were subdued more by threats and warnings than by force. Some, like Maroboduus of the Germans, Thrasybulus of the Thracians, and Archelaus of Cappadocia, whom he reduced to a province, were never allowed to return home. For 2 years after taking power, Tiberius never left Rome's gates. Afterward, his travels rarely went beyond nearby towns, sometimes to Antium, but even that infrequently and briefly. Though he frequently claimed plans to visit provinces and armies, preparing carriages and provisions yearly, he never advanced far, earning a joke nickname from a Greek proverb about rushing but never moving forward. After losing both sons, Germanicus in Syria, Drusus in Rome, Tiberius retired to Campania. Many believed he would never return and would soon die, and both proved nearly true. After leaving Rome, he barely escaped death when huge rocks fell during a supper near Terracina, killing guests and servants. He traveled around Campania, dedicating the capital at Capua and a temple to Augustus at Nola, which he used as a pretext, then withdrew to Capri. He loved the island for its natural defenses, surrounded by sheer cliffs and deep sea, accessible only by a narrow beach. But when Rome clamored for his return following a deadly amphitheater collapse at Fidene, which killed over 20,000, he came back briefly, granting the people open access to him, despite having earlier proclaimed no one should approach during his journey. Returning to Capri, he abandoned government duties entirely. He stopped filling knightly councils, changing military tribunes or provincial governors, leaving Spain and Syria without consular lieutenants for years. He allowed Armenia to be seized by the Parthians, Moesia by the Dacians and Sarmatians, and Gaul to suffer German invasions, humiliating and endangering the empire. With privacy and distance, Tiberius indulged long-hidden vices. As a young soldier, his love of wine earned him the nickname Tiberius. After becoming emperor and moral reformer, he once feasted for 2 days straight with Pomponius Flaccus and Lucius Piso, friends he rewarded with important posts. He arranged to dine with Cestius Gallus, a disreputable old man recently rebuked in the Senate, on condition their entertainment included naked girls. He favored an obscure quaestor candidate for winning him a drinking contest. He gifted a writer 200,000 sesterces for a comic dialogue between a truffle and a bird. He created a new office to serve his pleasures, appointing Titus Caesonius Priscus. At Capri, he built a suite designed for depravity, rooms with couches for secret immoral acts, hosting gatherings of girls, young men, and inventors of unnatural acts he called spintrii, who prostituted themselves to excite his lust. Chambers were decorated with lascivious art and banned erotic texts to inspire debauchery. He created secluded groves and caves where young men and women disguised as little pans and nymphs prostituted themselves publicly. As a result, he was mockingly nicknamed Caprinius, an obscene twist on the island's name. His infamy deepened with acts too vile to fully describe. He prized a painting by Parasius depicting Atalanta forced into unnatural submission, choosing it over receiving 1,000,000 sesterces instead, and hung it in his bedroom. At a sacrifice, he allegedly assaulted a young censer-bearer and a flute-playing brother, then broke their legs when they mocked each other's shame. His shameful relations with noblewomen were public knowledge. One, Melonia, refused his advances and was handed over to informers. Tiberius taunted her during her trial until she left, then committed suicide, accusing him openly of gross obscenity. A farce mocking him was performed to great applause at the next public games. Tiberius was stingy, never paying attendants' salaries on travels, only their meals, except once when prompted by his stepfather. He divided attendants into classes, giving the highest 600,000 sesterces, the next 400,000, and the lowest 200,000, whom he disparagingly called Greeks. Throughout his rule, he erected no grand buildings. His only projects, the Temple of Augustus and restoring Pompey's theater, remained unfinished after years. He rarely provided public entertainments and seldom attended those hosted by others, to avoid requests for favors. After aiding a few senators financially, he resolved to help only those who fully justified their need to the Senate. Modesty and shame led most needy senators to decline his aid, including the grandson of the famed orator Hortensius, who had raised 4 children on a small estate. Tiberius generously loaned 100 million sesterces interest-free for 3 years during a severe money shortage, forced by popular demand due to a Senate decree on secured loans. He also compensated owners after fires destroyed houses on the Celian Hill, ironically renaming it the Augustan Hill. To soldiers, after doubling Augustus's legacy to them, he gave mostly only 1,000 denarii each to Praetorian guards for refusing to support Sejanus's faction, and some gifts to Syrian legions that alone did not honor Sejanus's image. He rarely discharged veterans, counting on their advanced age to reduce pensions and saving the treasury. Only Asia's provinces received relief after the earthquake destruction. In a very short time, Tiberius's mind turned to outright robbery. Gaius Lentulus, an augur and a man of vast wealth, was so terrified and harassed by Tiberius's threats that he felt compelled to name him as heir. Lepida, a noblewoman, was condemned on charges fabricated to please Quirinus, a rich and childless senator who had divorced her 20 years before and accused her of attempting to poison him. Many distinguished men across Gaul, Spain, Syria, and Greece had their estates seized on shamelessly trivial pretenses. Some were charged only with holding large sums of money. Long-standing privileges like mining rights and tolls were stripped from cities and individuals. Vonones, king of the Parthians, who fled to Antioch seeking Rome's protection with vast treasure, was treacherously robbed and later murdered. His cruelty first showed against his own family in his betrayal of his brother Drusus, producing a letter in which Drusus urged restoring public freedom. Over time, his hostility extended to other relatives. When his wife was banished by her father and confined to a single town, Tiberius forbade her from leaving or speaking with men. He deprived her of her dowry and annual allowance on a technicality since Augustus left no provision for her in his will. Pressured by his ambitious mother Livia, who sought equal power, he often avoided her to prevent the appearance of being ruled by her, though he sometimes took her counsel. Offended when the Senate proposed adding son of Livia to his titles, he forbade her being called mother of the country, or receiving any special honors. He even admonished her not to meddle in serious affairs, especially after she was seen encouraging citizens and soldiers during a fire near the Temple of Vesta. Their relationship worsened, and when she produced letters from Augustus complaining of his harsh temper, some believed this breach prompted his retreat from public life. During her final illness, he showed no concern and delayed attending her funeral until her body decayed, then forbade her receiving divine honors, claiming to act on her wishes. He annulled her will and soon destroyed her friends and associates, condemning one close to her to the treadmill. Tiberius also showed no fatherly affection toward his sons, biological Drusus and adopted Germanicus. Offended by Drusus's reckless life, he barely mourned his death, quickly returning to business and reopening courts. When ambassadors from Ilium offered condolences late, he joked, "And I heartily condole with you on the loss of your renowned countryman Hector." He belittled Germanicus's successes, calling his victories ruinous, and complained in the Senate about Germanicus traveling to Alexandria without informing him during Rome's famine. It was widely suspected he arranged Germanicus's death through his lieutenant, Gnaeus Piso, who was later tried but could not produce the incriminating secret orders. Public outcry chanted, "Give us back our Germanicus," and his family endured brutal persecution. His daughter-in-law Agrippina, after Germanicus's death, once complained frankly, prompting Tiberius to recite a Greek verse jokingly asking if she was upset for not being empress. He never spoke to her again. After she refused fruit at dinner, a setup to poison her, he accused her of plotting escape and exiled her to Panditaria. When she cursed him, he ordered a centurion to blind one eye, force-fed her to prevent suicide, and persecuted her memory with slander. He even convinced the Senate to mark her birthday as unlucky. He took credit for sparing her strangulation and approved a Senate decree praising his clemency. Tiberius had 3 grandsons by Germanicus: Nero, Drusus, and Caius, and one by Drusus, also named Tiberius. After his sons' deaths, he introduced Nero and Drusus into the forum and gave money to the people but objected when they were included in public prayers, saying such honors belonged to proven men of mature age. His hostility led him to falsely accuse them of mocking him, labeling them enemies. He starved them to death, Nero on Ponza and Drusus in the palace dungeons. Nero was allegedly driven to suicide by executioners' threats. Drusus was so starved he tried to eat his mattress stuffing. Their remains were scattered and hard to collect. Among his close advisers, only a few escaped his wrath. Most, including Aelius Sejanus, once raised to the height of power, were destroyed. Sejanus's rise served Tiberius's purpose of eliminating Germanicus's heirs, securing succession for his own grandson. His cruelty extended even to Greeks in his family. When Zeno used a rare Doric dialect at supper, Tiberius banished him, suspecting mockery of Rhodes where the dialect was spoken. Seleucus, a grammarian who anticipated Tiberius's questions by consulting his attendants, was first dismissed, then driven to suicide. Tiberius's cruel and sullen nature appeared in childhood. His rhetoric teacher, Theodorus of Gadara, once rebuked him as mud mixed with blood. Upon gaining power, this severity intensified. At a funeral procession, when a bystander joked about unpaid legacies owed by Augustus, Tiberius ordered the man executed after delivering the message to Augustus in the afterlife. When a senator named Pompey opposed him, Tiberius threatened prison with a sharp pun on Pompey's name. When asked by a praetor if treason cases should be taken up in court, he replied that laws must be strictly enforced, and he did so harshly. For example, when Augustus's statue was defaced, witnesses were tortured to confirm guilt. Eventually, even minor actions, like beating a slave near the statue, carrying Augustus's image into a bathroom, or criticizing him, became capital offenses. One man was condemned to death for allowing honors to be decreed on the same day as Augustus. Punishments were brutal. Prisoners denied companionship or study. Many committed suicide to avoid public disgrace. Others poisoned themselves in the Senate house but were saved to be tortured more. Executed prisoners were thrown down the infamous Gemonian stairs into the Tiber, sometimes as many as 20 in a day, including women and children. Virgins were first deflowered before strangulation, since ancient law forbade their immediate execution. Those wishing death were forced to live. When he learned of one accused suicide, he reportedly said, "Carnulius has escaped me." A man of consular rank recalled a dwarf jester asking why a treason suspect lived so long. Tiberius rebuked the jester but wrote to the Senate urging swift punishment of the suspect. Grieved by his son Drusus's death, Tiberius's cruelty worsened. Believing his son died from drunken excess, he later learned he was poisoned by his wife Livilla and Sejanus. He tortured and executed many suspects in the plot, even imprisoning an innocent man invited to Rome, and then killing him to silence potential revelations. At Capri, condemned victims were tortured extensively and thrown from cliffs into the sea where soldiers awaited to kill any survivors. He invented tortures. One involved forcing victims to drink large amounts of wine, then binding their genitals with harp strings, causing intense pain through constriction and urinary blockage. Rumor holds that without death or intervention by the astrologer Thrasyllus, Tiberius would have destroyed many more, including his grandchildren, whom he hated for alleged illegitimacy. He once exclaimed, "Happy Priam, who survived all his children." Amidst these terrible acts, the fear, hatred, and loathing in which Tiberius lived are clear from many signs. He forbade soothsayers from private consultations unless witnesses were present. He tried to suppress oracles near Rome but abandoned the effort, terrified by the divine authority of the praenestine lots. Sealed scrolls that disappeared when taken home but reappeared only once returned to the temple. He dared not send some consular governors to their provinces for years, keeping them near and giving orders through deputies while they retained their official titles. After condemnation, his daughter-in-law and grandsons were always moved in chains and hidden litters, guarded to prevent any onlookers from gawking along their journey. When Sejanus plotted against Tiberius, the emperor managed to have him removed only with great difficulty and cunning. To keep him close, Tiberius made Sejanus his colleague in his 5th consulship, granted him false hopes of marriage alliances and tribunician power, then suddenly accused him of treason with a humble plea to the Senate for protection as a poor solitary old man. Fearing rebellion, Tiberius freed his grandson Drusus from confinement and prepared troops and ships for escape plans. He even watched for discreet signals from a clifftop to ensure swift action. Though Sejanus's conspiracy was crushed, Tiberius remained imprisoned by fear, never leaving the Villa Jovis for 9 months. During this time, condemned criminals cursed him openly, scattering insulting handbills in Senate seats. Sometimes he wished to bury the disgrace. At other times, he aired the insults himself. Adding to his troubles was a letter from Artabanus, king of the Parthians, accusing him of parricide, murder, cowardice, and lewdness, and advising that he end his life to satisfy the anger he had stirred. Weary of himself, Tiberius admitted his misery in a letter to the Senate. "What to write, how to write, or what not to write, I call upon the gods to curse me more terribly than I feel daily." Some believe his skill in divination foretold the infamy awaiting him, explaining why he refused early honors like Father of his Country, or senatorial oaths to his acts, fearing future shame if his conduct failed. His speeches warned the Senate against binding themselves to any person's acts too firmly, in case of sudden change. Physically, Tiberius was tall and robust, broad-shouldered and balanced. He favored his left hand and had famously strong joints, able to pierce a fresh apple with a finger or snap a young man's head with a flick. His complexion was fair, his hair worn long behind to cover his neck, a family distinction. Despite a handsome face, his skin often bore pimples. His large eyes saw vividly at night immediately after waking but quickly dimmed. He walked stiffly with neck upright, wore a usually frowning and silent expression, and spoke slowly with subtle finger gestures, arrogant habits noted and pardoned by Augustus as natural defects. He enjoyed good health mostly unaided by doctors, especially after age 30. Religiously indifferent, Tiberius was devoted to astrology and convinced fate governed all. He feared lightning and wore a laurel crown during storms, believing it protected him. He diligently studied Greek and Latin arts, imitating Messala Corvinus in Latin style but often veering into obscure affectation. He composed a lyric ode lamenting Lucius Caesar's death and Greek poems modeled on Euphorion, Rhianus, and Parthenius, whom he admired greatly, placing their works and statues in public libraries. Scholars competed to offer him interpretations. His chief interest was in mythic history, quizzing grammarians on minute details. Who was Hecuba's mother? What name did Achilles take among virgins? What did the sirens sing? On his first Senate day after Augustus's death, he offered frankincense and wine silently in homage, emulating Minos's mourning for his son. Though fluent in Greek, he seldom used it in the Senate, apologizing for adopting foreign words like monopolium, monopoly, and pushing to replace embleima, emblem, with Latin or descriptive phrases. He forbade witnesses testifying in Greek during trials. During his seclusion at Capri, he twice attempted to visit Rome. Once, sailing near the Naumachia Gardens, he posted guards along the Tiber to keep visitors away. On another occasion, he reached only the 7th mile on the Appian Way before returning, deterred by a prodigy, a snake he tended to find devoured by ants, warning him of popular fury. Hastening back to Campania, he fell ill at Astura, recovered slightly at Circeii, and to show strength attended games and demonstrated hunting skill. Overheating in javelin practice led to relapse, but he maintained usual lavish entertainments, concealing his condition. When his physician Charicles attempted to check his pulse, Tiberius reassured him by continuing the feast with customary formality. Frustrated by senators dodging trials, cases dismissed without hearings, Tiberius raged against contempt and prepared to retreat to Capri, waiting for safety. Storm delays and worsening illness led to his death at a villa formerly owned by Lucullus, aged 78 on March 16, during the consulship of Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus and Caius Pontius Niger. Some suspect poisoning by his heir Caius, others that he was starved or smothered during a fever. Seneca recounts Tiberius's last moments. He removed his signet ring, seemed ready to give it away, but replaced it. Then, after a silent pause, summoned attendants who did not answer. He tried to rise but fell near his bed. Shortly before death, he planned to place a statue of the Timenian Apollo in a new temple but dreamt the god forbade it. Days before, Capri's lighthouse collapsed in an earthquake. Fiery embers mysteriously flared in his chambers for hours. The public rejoiced at his death. Some shouted to throw his body into the Tiber, others cursed him to the underworld. His cruelty had made his memory hateful. On the day condemned criminals awaited execution, guards, uncertain of law after his death and with no authority to delay, strangled them and threw them down the Gemonian stairs, deepening outrage. Though many demanded his body be charred in the amphitheater at Atella, it was brought to Rome for traditional rites. Tiberius left 2 wills, one in his hand, another by a freedman, witnessed but by lowly men. He named grandsons Caius and Tiberius joint heirs, with the survivor inheriting all. He also bequeathed gifts to Vestal virgins, soldiers, Roman people, and city magistrates. When Augustus died, the Republic's overthrow was distant history for most living. Augustus's long and gentle rule had reconciled Romans to despotism. Tiberius, Augustus's adopted son, was mature and familiar with Augustus's governance, expected to follow it. His mother Livia, widowed and influential, still held great sway. Yet Tiberius's harsh, reserved nature, lack of popularity, and disobedience to Livia worked against him. Posthumus Agrippa, Augustus's grandson by Julia, was a more natural heir by blood, though exiled years earlier. Rumors persisted that Augustus planned to restore Posthumus as successor. Many Romans favored him out of sympathy for his parents. Suspicion lingered that Augustus's elder grandsons, Caius and Lucius, died violently to clear Tiberius's path. This fear was confirmed by the deliberate secrecy surrounding Augustus's death until Posthumus was removed, likely by Livia and Tiberius's joint order. Though rivals were eliminated, Tiberius remained uneasy, aware of his weak claim. His quiet acquisition of power, without popular, senatorial, or military support, owed much to his mother's influence and his own craftiness. He feigned reluctance, stirred the Senate to assign him government while expressing invincible hesitation, refused permanent acceptance but did not fix abdication, and feigned frailty and old age to calm Senate fears and curb Germanicus's ambition, crafting a scene of cunning, inconsistency, and deceit. During this time, Livia Drusilla, mother of the emperor and widow of Augustus, died at 86. She was the daughter of Lucius Drusus Callidianus and married Tiberius Claudius Nero, by whom she had 2 sons, Tiberius and Drusus. Caligula once commented that she was an Ulysses in a woman's dress, reflecting her cunning nature. Octavius first saw her as she fled danger while supporting Antony. Though pregnant, he resolved to marry her. Whether by her choice remains unclear. To marry her, Octavius divorced Scribonia and, with the augur's approval, wed Livia. They had no children, but she wielded great influence over Augustus, whom she cleverly controlled while he remained unaware of her ambitions. Livia aimed to secure an heir for the empire. Since she bore no children with Augustus, she plotted to place her eldest son, Tiberius, from her previous marriage, in line for succession. Her plan was ruthless: eliminate all male offspring of Augustus's daughter Julia and Agrippa, to clear the path for Tiberius through adoption. While Julia's sons were young and her fertility uncertain, Livia waited. Once the natural limit of Julia's childbearing passed and the grandsons matured, Livia's strategy was set in motion. The first victim was Gaius Caesar Agrippa, Augustus's eldest grandson. Sent to Armenia to fight Persia, he fell ill and died after receiving a fatal blow, likely from Lollius, his governor and possible agent of Livia's intrigue. Augustus seemed unaware, later promoting Lollius, though he eventually fell from favor due to greed. Lollius's deceit fooled even Horace and Augustus himself, who praised him lavishly in poetry. Lucius, Julia's second son, was banished to Campania for speaking against Augustus. Augustus later sought to recall him, but Livia and Tiberius, fearing the consequences, arranged his assassination. Posthumous Agrippa, the third grandson, likewise fell from grace, confined in Surrentum, where he was eventually killed, likely on Livia or Tiberius's orders. Thus, through Livia's machinations, all Augustus's grandsons met tragic ends. Many suspect she fostered Julia's scandalous behavior to further alienate the family from Augustus. Yet, Livia's ambition met bitter justice in Tiberius's ingratitude. She introduced a dark precedent, the brutal practice of domestic murder, unknown before, where thirst for power corrupted family bonds and humanity itself. Among the first victims of Tiberius's bloody reign was Germanicus, son of Drusus and adopted by Augustus. A beloved and meritorious prince, Germanicus had gained fame for military success in Germany, where soldiers hailed him as emperor after Augustus's death. He refused and remained loyal to Tiberius, continued victorious campaigns, and subdued Armenian revolts. But his growing renown sparked Tiberius's jealousy. By secret order, Germanicus was poisoned near Antioch at age 34. Rome mourned deeply, convinced he would have restored the Republic's freedom had he lived. He was honored in public festivals, with crowns placed in Augustus's priestly chambers, his ivory effigy paraded in games, and triumphal arches erected in Rome, along the Rhine, and in Syria, commemorating his service and sacrifice. His funeral was solemn and simple, praising his virtues rather than displaying pomp. Many likened him to Alexander the Great for his character, age, death, and death's location near Babylon. Beyond his military talents, Germanicus practiced humanity and letters, composing 2 Greek comedies, epigrams, and a Latin translation of Aratus. He married Agrippina, daughter of Marcus Agrippa, who brought his ashes home and exposed his murderer, Piso. Unable to endure public disgrace, Piso committed suicide. Agrippina, once a figure of power, was later banished to Pandataria by Tiberius, dying there from famine. But Tiberius's cruelty extended to Germanicus's children. He falsely accused grandsons Nero and Drusus of sedition and vice, securing a Senate sentence declaring them public enemies. Nero was exiled to Ponza, where he starved to death. Drusus perished after 9 days of starvation, reportedly eating his bed's stuffing in desperation. The youngest, Gaius, deemed too wicked, was chosen as Tiberius's successor to ensure a less favorable comparison. Sejanus, Tiberius's minister, was a native of Vulcinium, son of a Roman knight. He first gained favor with Gaius Caesar and, after Gaius's death, ingratiated himself with Tiberius, earning his full trust. Sejanus sought to secure the Senate and army's loyalty, and manipulated Rome's elite women with secret marriage promises. His main obstacles were Tiberius's sons and grandsons, whom he eliminated one by one. Drusus, enraged by Sejanus, struck him in anger and was marked for death. Sejanus seduced Drusus's wife, Livia, persuading her to marry him after Drusus was poisoned, allegedly by an eunuch named Ligdus acting on their orders. Drusus, son of Tiberius and Vipsania, showed valor in Illyricum and Pannonia but led a dissolute life. Horace praised Drusus's military courage while gently cautioning him to cultivate civil virtues with these lines. Yet sage instructions to refine the soul and raise the genius, wondrous aid impart, conveying inward, as they purely roll, strength to the mind and vigor to the heart. When morals fail, the stains of vice disgrace the fairest honors of the noblest race. Following Drusus's death, Sejanus openly sought to marry the widow, but Tiberius opposed it and endorsed Germanicus as successor. Enraged, Sejanus pressed his suit and, awaiting the right moment, persuaded the indolent Tiberius to retreat from Rome to Campania under the pretext of relieving him from government burdens. Left in control, Sejanus's ambition quickly grew beyond bounds. He publicly claimed sovereignty, reducing Tiberius to a dependent ruler of the island Capri. He mocked Tiberius on stage. News reached Tiberius, who, outraged, ordered Sejanus's arrest. Deserted by supporters, Sejanus was captured and strangled that very day. Human nature recoils at this tyrant's cruelties. Having stained his hands with kin's blood, he unleashed savage fury on the public. Age or sex offered no protection. Innocent children were executed before their parents. Virgins suffered defilement followed by strangulation. Cruelty piled on cruelty. Fathers were forced to witness their children's deaths. Mother's grief was itself punished by death. Fires devastated Mount Celius and the circus, while a collapsing amphitheater stage at Fidene crushed or killed 20,000 spectators. Only once did Tiberius show generosity, compensating fire victims, a meager palliation of his harsh rule. Throughout life, Tiberius defied nature's course. Though occasionally affable, he was generally morose, feigning austere virtue. In old age, after many reforms, he indulged in unnatural excesses. His cruelty was restrained only by filial fear of his mother and later political caution. Once freed, he indulged without restraint. Pliny records that malleable glass was invented during Tiberius's reign, but its workshop and tools destroyed to protect precious metals' value. The darkness over Rome stifled science and literature. The Augustan era's towering fame suppressed new genius. Neither emperor nor ministers patronized the arts. Instead, poetry and prose writers faded under his rule.